Let's talk about boundaries and choices and naming our needs. This is something I still have to practice, that I have to bring a lot of mindfulness and intentionality to because it's not easy. It's something that I still struggle with as much as I try to bring that awareness to it. But you have to remember, and this is a message to myself as much as it is to you, anybody watching, right? You have to remember that you get a choice. Now, there's exceptions to this, right? If you are still living with your parents under the age of 18, if you are in situations where somehow somebody else really is in control of your circumstances, yeah, then that's different. But for most of us, in most aspects of our lives, as much as it may feel sometimes like things are outside of our control, and many things are outside of our control, but in so many things, we tell ourselves these stories that we are trapped. We're obligated. We're forced to do something. I've told myself this story so many times. This is something I was recently realizing. I had this narrative that of being trapped. I got called out on this by a friend. I was using that language. I was saying I was trapped in this job situation or this, particular situation in my life. I was using this language of obligation. And yet, after it was brought to my attention multiple times, after I started going back through old journal entries for the last few years and started really noticing that particular language, literally using the word trapped over and over again to describe situations in my life that, looking back through that sort of awakened lens, I was not trapped in. That was an internal narrative. I was trapping myself. No one else was holding me against my will. And yet, that was the language I was using. And so, by bringing awareness to this, I've been trying to shift that language. I've been trying to bring awareness to when I start to use those words of obligation, those words like trapped or have to, need to, must, right? Because obviously there are things in our lives that we, need to do to take care of ourselves or the people that we care for, our families, our children, our parents, whoever it is. And we still get choices. If you are in a situation where you're watching this video, you're probably in a situation where you have some amount of choice and control over some parts of your life. Even if you're under 18 and still under, your parents' household, you still get to choose how you show up in situations, how you show up in conversations. You get to choose how you name your needs. And this is something it's taken me so long to learn. And I hope that more people are starting to learn these things sooner because I hear more people talking about it. I hear friends of mine who are my age starting to talk about their own experiences with learning to name their needs, right? To advocate to other people what their boundaries are, right? Boundaries is a big one for me that it has taken me a lot of practice and still continues to take me a lot of practice. But we are all our own authority in our lives. And even if we're in a situation where we really don't have as much control over all of the circumstances as we would like, there are still some aspects that we get to choose how we show up. We get to choose how we treat ourselves. We get to choose the language we use with ourselves, like my example of shifting the language from trapped and obligated in situations where I wasn't really, nobody else was trapping me. It was just me trapping me. We get to shift how we talk to ourselves, how we treat ourselves. For a long, 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 long time, I had a language that I used with myself of being stupid, right? Anytime something would go wrong, particularly in prior relationships, I would put this blame on myself and call myself stupid, be frustrated with myself, like, Mallory, I can't believe you did that. That was so dumb. That was so stupid. You should have known better. In situations where that wasn't really true. It had nothing to do with my intelligence or lack thereof, but I was using that language as a way of almost trying to take back the power in the situation, of trying to blame myself for not having known better, of being stupid, when really what I needed at that time was to practice better boundaries and was to name my needs and was to advocate earlier and more often for what I needed. I spent a lot of time in relationships that I should have left a lot sooner, that just weren't healthy for me. They weren't right for me. I'd outgrown them. I've spent a lot of time repeating patterns in work and career situations. As I mentioned, I was reading some old journal entries recently where I really started to see these patterns showing up, right? I would date the journal entries so I could go back a few years ago and see that the same language I was using in recent weeks and recent months is very similar to the same words and patterns and situations I was putting myself in 2 or 3 years ago, 5 or 6 years ago, 10 years ago. And so often we do keep repeating these cycles and these patterns. And sometimes they are generational. Often they're generational, right? Because we are products of the people who raise us, the cultures that raise us, all of the words and influences that come from outside that are not our own. But once we start to notice our patterns, bring awareness to them, and honor our inner truth, listen to what is right for us, because that's going to be different for you than for me. And that's even going to be different for me now than it was for me 10 years ago or 10 years in the future. We get to honor ourselves and we get to honor others in the same way, right? By honoring our inner truth, we also get to acknowledge that other people have their own inner truth, and what's right for them might not be right for us, and vice versa. So name your needs. You can start to do it in small ways, right? Even if it's just, acknowledging what you want or don't want for dinner this evening, right? Even if it's just having an earlier bedtime or letting yourself sleep in the morning. Those simple, basic needs, right? Paying attention when you need to go to the bathroom. This was a big one. I went to the Gathering of the Shamans a few months ago, and Rhonda McCrimmon, who is an amazing person of wisdom and teacher, she talks about this idea of these 3 cauldrons in Celtic shamanism. And one of them is your lower cauldron. So it's basically all of the, that body stuff that we sometimes forget. And it was this big unlock for me, this one idea about listening to your lower cauldron and just, hey, I need to go to the bathroom. Let me go do that. Speaking of, I have places to be, things to do. So listen to yourself, honor your needs, and I'll talk to you next time.